Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 2017-2018 Vermont Mentoring Grants webinar. Thank you for joining us and for your interest in applying for a grant. I just want to run through a few quick things. Once I said I was going to mute everybody, but also we're recording this so that folks that aren't able to attend at this time can view it later. If you want to, you enjoy it so much, you just want to view it each night, you can do that. Or if you need to leave early or step out for something, you will be able to view it later online. So just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that. Just with agenda here, really we're going to be going through the reasons for the changes to the Vermont Mentoring application, doing a quick one-on-one with results-based accountability. Kate McGowan from Addison County United Way, who's our consultant that we've been using through Benchmarks for Better Vermont, is on with us. And she'll be talking a little bit more about RBA and what it is and answering questions that you may have. And then really the meat of this is going to be walking through the application process to make sure it's clear and that everybody's on the same page. So when I meet with you and when you start working on your grant, you have some questions. Hopefully they can get answered during this process. And then any other questions you may have, we can leave some time for that. I know we budgeted an hour and a half. I doubt this will take that long. I don't really believe in webinars being much over an hour because I personally lose focus. So we'll try to get it done as quickly as possible while covering everything. So just to get things going here, wanted to jump right in and talk a little bit about the reasons for changing the Vermont Mentoring Grant application. So this is our 4th year of doing grants since Mobius became a statewide mentoring partnership. And based on feedback from you all for the last 3 years, we've been making small tweaks to the grant process. Anything from, no longer requiring that programs report on attendance data or academic data because it just wasn't realistic. And it also wasn't really what we needed. So anything from that to, trying to provide a little more guidance around how much funding you should be asking for. We've been able to make those small tweaks, but we realized that we really needed to make a bigger adjustment, and that was the reason behind us doing this change to this grant. So when we get into it, you'll see that there are some significant changes. Hopefully they're there and make sense to you, but also you can see that we took out some aspects that didn't really need to be there, that were left over from older grants, and really made it more streamlined. So the process that we took to do this, just to be transparent, we applied to the Henderson Foundation for funding for the grants, as we do every year. And part of that is a 10% admin fee that Mobius charges to administer the grants. We used some of that admin fee to contract out with Benchmarks for Better Vermont to revamp our grant process into the results-based accountability framework and methodology. So we've been working with Kate on that. We had a stakeholder meeting where we had folks from the Program Leadership Council. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Program Leadership Council, it's a group of mentor coordinators from the state that have been around for a while, but nominated by their peers over the years and volunteered to actually guide Mobius and make sure we stay grounded in the work we're doing, which is ultimately to support you all. So we had a stakeholder engagement meeting where we identified sort of what should programs be reporting on and providing, and what information does Mobius actually need to make sure that we're able to secure funding and gather the information we need from programs. We then tweaked the application and created an application in this framework and shared it with the Program Leadership Council for feedback, got some feedback, and then eventually edited it within Civicor, which is the Vermont Mentoring database. So that's really the process that we went through. The idea behind us really making this change and going into the results-based accountability framework, which you'll hear a little bit more, but I want to provide a little bit of context, is that it's a methodology that other funders throughout the state are adopting, and also the state in general. And we saw that there could be a lot of benefits to doing this, not only for Mobius, but even more importantly for programs. So we thought it could be a way in which there's a wide variety, I think, within the mentoring field with where program coordinators and program staff are with understanding results-based accountability. We have some programs that have fully adopted it into their agency and some programs that have never heard of it. So we thought it was a good way to introduce RBA to the mentoring field a good way to streamline our application and remove some unnecessary questions, anything from you having to put in what towns you serve every year when that information is already in the database, to questions that just didn't really need to be in there, like how will you meet all the required grant requirements, which didn't really make sense. And every year I found myself trying to explain it and never really coming up with a good answer. To things like having to have to fill out a budget in the grant process, in the grant application, and then also submit a budget. So we really try to cut things out and make it a little more streamlined so you're not doing things twice for no reason. The other aspect that I got really excited about this is really tying in the other aspects of what Mobius and mentoring programs are doing around the state. So tying in the quality mentoring system, QMS, and the work that mentoring programs are doing to make sure they're meeting best practices right into the grant process, and tying in the data that you're all gathering from the core questions in the Vermont mentoring surveys into your grant, to make sure that we aren't having all these outliers. We can tie it all into one aspect. So we got really excited about the possibility of that. The other couple things for programs, just the fact that we can better assist, hopefully this will better assist you in evaluating your program and making strategic improvements. And finally, being able to provide you with some language that you might be able to use to secure funding from other sources outside the Vermont Mentoring Grants, because you all know that these grants can help seed fund programs, but they're not going to fund your program in full every year. So that's really what we got excited about for the changes. Mobius was, it makes it a lot easier for us if folks are reporting in a results-based accountability format and that idea, because that's how we have to report back to the funders that we get the money for the grants from. And that's basically it. That's the reasoning behind it and how we went about it. I wanted to unmute Kate McGowan here so she can introduce herself and guide us through a little bit of RBA 101. So Kate, I unmuted you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, everybody can, I believe, yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah, they're all muted. So
Chad,
can you hear me?
Perfect. Well, you can't hear. Type in the chat window. Yeah.
Excellent. Hi, everybody. So as Chad said, I'm Kate McGowan, and it's been a real treat to learn more about all the work that you do and what Mobius does, and try to be part of a process that gets to the heart of the matter and helps tell the story that much better, so that we can get more support for your programs. The one thing I would really highlight from Chad's presentation, as he shared the process, one of the things that RBA asks us to do is to be very inclusive in the conversations, and that it doesn't happen behind a closed door with one person. And so one thing I just highlight is that this process that Chad and his team undertook has included a lot of people and a lot of thought and a lot of revisions and a lot of learning along the way. And the other part, which I really admire and insist in my own United Way, is we don't ask grantees to do something we're unwilling to do ourselves. So the other part was really embracing RBA, learning about it, and starting to apply it to their programs. So while you're doing this, so is Mobius. So that's I think that's commendable. So I know that some of you know, maybe are actually doing and using RBA, and some of you may have heard of it, and some of you may be saying, what the heck are we talking about? So this is not meant to be a full training. It's really an overview to put it in context of what you're facing with the upcoming grant. Mark Friedman was the designer of RBA, or results-based accountability, and he would define it as a disciplined way of thinking and taking action that communities can use to improve the lives of children, youth, families, adults, and communities as a whole, and also by organizations to improve their programs. So essentially, it's a tool to be used. It's a very precise tool that has a process and can be easily used in multiple layers of an organization or within a community. That said, it's not simple or easy. It takes time, because we're talking about really looking and understanding the work we do, articulating and refining how we evaluate that work, which is often a sticky subject within organizations, and sort of the promise of continuous learning and using the data to get better, to tell your story, to be honest with yourselves and with your community about how you're delivering your work. All right, we can do the next slide.
Yep, there we go.
Yep. All right, so why use RBA? Well, one reason, which isn't a great one, is that funders are requiring it. and we'll talk a little bit more about that down the road. There are a lot of really even better reasons to use RBA. One is, as mentioned, it's easily understood process. It's not jargon. It doesn't require a PhD. For those of you who might have PhDs in data collection, do that too. But RBA is a really lovely way of including all the folks that don't have that way of looking at research and data, or for organizations that don't have the money to pay for longitudinal studies, et cetera. So it's easily understood. You can apply it immediately, and you'll just get better and better at it. It is structured, and it's conversational in nature. So the first part is really identifying what do you want to measure, and that's a conversation amongst a lot of people in your organization, stakeholders, multiple staff members, board members, funders. You can go as wide and as broad as you want. And sometimes it's the first time that conversation has happened. And when I have worked with folks or have done this in my own community, it usually results in really great and juicy conversations and a lot of learning. One of the things that I love about RBA is that it sets the right level of accountability. And by this, I mean that it differentiates between community level work and program level work. And I think far too often and for too long, funders and donors and even those of us who run programs have confused those two things. So if you decide to go further and learn more about this, I don't think it hits so much into this grant round, but it does differentiate between population or community level results or indicators and your own program performance and those measures. And very rarely are they the same thing. So when you're looking at your own program, it's about learning how are we doing and what are we contributing to the bigger problems in our community and telling about your part in that work. Because it's conversational and inclusive, it should foster collaboration and consensus. Again, it's conversational, so you have a series of questions you can ask about how are we doing, what do we want, how do we get there, who should be involved, and what are they all going to do, and what am I going to do? And it's a really great community or internal process. Another thing that I love about it is it clarifies roles. So part of identifying what you are willing to do and how you're going to show that you're doing it well is it also allows you to have the conversation to say, we don't do that, but somebody else does, and we are working with them, or we'd like to work with them, or identify the gaps and not step into them unless it makes sense for your organization. It's important to know that it is data-driven and transparent, so it's not like you collect the data and then sit on it or put it in a binder. Your data becomes the basis for all your decision-making, all your improvements, your budgets, evaluation of staff, reporting to yourself, your board, funders, the community. So it's embracing the data and marrying it to story, right? So it's an and. It doesn't mean we get rid of the stories. And often the data that we decide to collect is rooted in the heartwarming stories or the stuff that gets you and your people back to work, your mentors back to work every day. What is success? And can you capture it so you can tell the whole story and say, not only does this story happen, it happens 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and we've been doing it for 30 years. Here's the cumulative effect. And that's pretty exciting because it appeals to multiple types of audiences. And finally, as Chad talked about, this is sort of pervasive throughout the funding world in the state of Vermont. So if you haven't heard about RBA, that means that maybe it hasn't trickled out to some of the folks you're working with, but most likely you have heard about it. And with that comes, there's been kind of quick and big growth in trying to implement RBA. And what I would encourage you to do is understand that not everybody has their arms around it completely, and maybe doing it just they're where they're at, and that's great. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us to really become well-formed in this and good practitioners so we can call it when it's not quite sitting right, when maybe somebody's confused population and performance measures, or they've taken it behind a closed door and said, here's what you're going to do, and that sort of thing. That it's incumbent upon all of us to, if we decide to, master it, understand it, and help each other stay accountable in its fidelity. All right, the next slide. So what's going to matter to you for this grant process and the immediate nature of things is program performance measures fall into three categories. How much did we do? How well did we do it? And is anyone better off? So you'll see that it's not jargony. It's a conversation ready to be had, and that part of your process will be determined what do we want to report about these things? And how does it inform the story we want to tell ourselves and our funders, such as Mobius? Okay, the next one. So ideally, you will decide to do this for you, not for a funder. I have plenty of agencies who just do it for United Way in the state of Vermont and don't embrace this as really a learning opportunity and a process that can be really captured in a cultural change of the organization. Hopefully you decide that you're going to embrace it and do that, because it's much more powerful when you do. And you'll decide that you want to learn more. So in the next slide, there's some opportunities for knowing how to do that. So the first stop would be Mark Friedman's book, When Trying Hard Isn't Good Enough. You can get used copies for about $7, and it's not even that expensive new. It's an easy read. I highly recommend you take a look at it and try to get your arms around it. There's a lot of case examples and a lot of just easy information to absorb. The other place you can go is the web. You could just Google RBA, or results-based accountability. The RA guide is Mark Friedman's site, and then BBVT, which Chad mentioned, through Marlborough College, is also another site that you can go to get more information. The RA guide has a lot of free information. They have templates, they have conversation guides, some background. It's a good place to start. In social media, there's actually an RBA Facebook group. It's international. It's kind of fun to get involved, and I post questions when I do the training for BBVT. I often get I'm always learning, so there's sometimes a new group, and I hadn't thought about RBA. The most recent one was really around some specifics around public policy, and I threw that out to the RBA Facebook group, and I had emails and responses on Facebook from England and Wales and New Zealand, and it was really fun to get involved that way, and just to watch what other folks are doing with this. In person, you might have a local United Way that uses RBA and might be able to help you. They might have someone who knows what they're doing in this arena, and maybe not. You just have to reach out and find out if they're using this model. And finally, there's always trainings and coaching through the Center for New Leadership, which runs BBVT at Marlborough Grad School. We're in the process right now. We're coming into week 3 of a 4-part series in Burlington, and there'll be another one in fall, probably on the other side of the state. So that's all I've got at this point.
Great, thank you, Kate. So any questions just about RBA in general before we get more into the Vermont Mentoring Grant itself? If you have any questions, just type something in the chat box. We'll give folks a second here to do so, and we'll unmute you so you can ask. We also, Kate's sticking around, so if you have questions later too, after we look at the grant more specifically, we can do it then. All righty. Kate, it looks like you're off the hook for now.
Okay.
Great. So getting into the grant. So we're going to just review the webpage where you can find information, look at the timeline of the process, make sure everybody knows where the grant guidelines are, and then we'll get into the application. This really is going to focus on for programs that already exist or are looking to implement. I think for new program planning, there is a separate grant. This is all good information for you to absorb, because hopefully you'll be heading down this direction in the next year if you're looking to plan now. But for this webinar, it really is going to be focusing on the grant for folks that currently exist or are implementing this year. So if we go to the Mobius webpage, and you can just click on Resources for Programs and go down to the Vermont Mentoring Grants. If you haven't gone here yet, hopefully this is a refresher for most of you. Lists out the timeline for the grant process. So we're currently right on time here with the webinar. The grant application will actually open up tomorrow, so you'll be able to start playing around with it tomorrow. But I ask everybody not to submit a grant before we have a grant meeting, because that grant meeting really, Mobius's vision with this is we're a funder, but we're also a supporter. We want to work hand in hand with you to put together the best grant, so that when the grant committee gets together, you have the best shot at actually receiving funding. Just as a refresher for everybody, I gather all the information after our grant meetings, after you submit grant materials in your applications, and I actually provide summaries onto the grant committee, but I actually don't vote on where funding should go. We have a volunteer grant committee made up of funders that fund this process, some people in the community that have shown an interest in mentoring, and we also usually have someone from Mobius's board and someone that has some connection to programming in the past, either someone who used to work in mentoring, or someone that's been on a board in the past. So we have some voice there for mentoring programs as well. So the timeline goes through. The applications are due on the 28th of July. The grant decisions will be out by the end of August, and then we'll actually send out funding, provided we get the signed grant award letter back to us on September 1, provided that we have all the funding, and that's always a big caveat. We're always working with the state and with the Henderson Foundation to get that money in the door. The state's usually the one that takes a little bit longer, so we can't give out money until we actually have money, unfortunately. So things are looking well, but we also haven't gotten finalized. Yes, we have the money coming our way, but from past history, I think we should have around $350,000 to grant out this year if all goes well. Reporting then is just the same as usual, January 15th and May 31st. The reports, the templates will be out a month before the report is due. And I think that's pretty much all that we need to discuss in terms of timeline. If you want to look at the grant guidelines can be accessed right here off the webpage or through the database. I ask everybody, in addition to attending this webinar or reviewing it, that you review the grant guidelines. Hopefully all the information that you need to at least start the process and understand things better will be in the grant guidelines here. In that grant guidelines, you get into how to apply. So it guides you what we'll show you now about how to actually get into the database. It talks a little bit about what the criteria are for getting a grant, what the reporting requirements will be, to, what can you expect in terms for what are things that the grant committee looks at when they say how much money you should be getting. So that hopefully can provide a little bit of basic guidelines there, and then it gets into the rubric, which is more, do I even really qualify for a grant? Am I at a place where I should be receiving funding? So hopefully this will help guide you through that process. So going back, just make sure we're on pace here on the same thing. So, slide. All right, so that's the timeline, the guidelines. Let's get into the application here. Once again, if you have questions as we're going through, don't hesitate to type them in, and we'll answer them as we can here. So getting into the grant itself. So the grant process is done through the Mobius, the Vermont Mentoring Database, which can be accessed off the Mobius homepage, unless you have a shortcut on your browser. But you go into the homepage here, mobiusmentors.org, scroll down, and you're going to log in as program. So we're going to use our fake program here and log in. And so this view is actually a simplified view. This would be for folks that aren't currently full database users, or anybody that has, all programs have access to this side of it. The fake agency we have here isn't one that tracks all the information, but this basically should look the same for everybody. So if you want to apply for a grant, you go into new grant applications and you'll see two grants. You see the one that we're going to talk about today, the 2017-2018 Vermont Mentoring Grant, and the new program planning grant. So we're focusing on this one right here. So you click on apply for this grant, and you get right into things here. So you want to make sure that you wait for it to load. One of the aspects with the system is that you may see some things pop up. You may have seen it there. Wait for it to load. Once the wheel stops spinning, you're good to go. So we are going to walk through this section. So we have section by section. We have basic information, and then all these other sections are minimized to start. You have strategic improvements, program measures, general program information, financials, and other. So we'll walk through section by section, and I'll fill in some aspects or explain what you want to do, and then I'll show you how to save your grant, come back and edit it later, and also submit your grant onto Mobius. So from the get-go, grant type you don't need to worry about. That's just the fact that you're applying for this grant. Your agency should automatically pop up in here. The fact that you're using the database, your name, my name technically is, with this login, is grant app. So you want to fill out who the money should be sent to. So if it should go to your, if you're a bigger nonprofit, it should go to your finance department, that's fine. If it's your supervisory unit, it should go to your superintendent's office. Just put where you want it to go. So I have some idea of who I should be in touch with about that. I'll always follow up with you as well. You want to click on the programs that are served by this grant. So if you run a bunch of programs, usually most folks are clicking on all of them, but we'll click on a couple of these. Benji had some fun making up names. If you have any other programs that aren't in the database yet, that usually is unusual, but it's possible. If you're trying to start a new program there, you can add it in. And then we hop into strategic improvements. So this is where we're really starting to tie in the quality mentoring system. So for you all that aren't familiar with the quality mentoring system, it's a national system that helps mentoring programs ensure that they're meeting all required best practices. It's based on the elements of effective practice, which is currently in its 4th edition that is released by Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. And Mobius has partnered with Mentor to bring the system to Vermont to make sure that programs have all the resources and have all the knowledge about how can they make sure the program is meeting best practices and keeping everybody safe, but also seeing the best benefit for the youth and the mentors they serve. So that's a quick background on QMS. What this is, so the first thing, there's 9 different categories for those of you who have gone through the quality mentoring system. For those of you who have not gone through yet, when I meet with you, I'll walk you through and provide you a little more detail about this. You can access the elements of effective practice and what all these different sections actually mean. We'll go into it a little bit more in a minute. But you want to rate where you fall as a program. And this is a self-assessment. This is what you think you fall. We've provided a little bit of a key here, with 3 being that you meet all best practices, 3 being, 2 being that you meet most of them, but not all of them, and then going up the scale, 4 and 5, you're meeting best practices and you're doing some enhancements. And so to provide a little bit more context there, I'm going to actually just hop out of here for a second and go into another window. Hopefully I can pull this off here, just to show people where they can get there for about QMS. So if you're logging to the website, if you go to your agencies tab, or you log into the database, you go to your agencies tab, you click View, and you click on QMS. Most of you that haven't gone through the process will just click Add New QMS. I know I'm breezing through, and that's saying that we're always here to answer questions. You can give us a call. We'll walk you through it. But I'll also show you this if need be when we meet. I want to give you just an idea that all the information you need about what best practices are is in the database for you. You just need to figure out how to access it. We can guide you through. But the quality mentoring system is broken down into 9 different categories, which you see on the other page with program design and planning, program management, recruitment. It guides you through all of it. So what you want to do is drag these sliders for each one. So currently it's at 1. So if you meet best practices, you drag it to 3. If you're doing better than best practices, 4. If you put it at 2. It's a self-assessment for us to gauge. And then when you report out at the end of the year, you'll report back where you fall with all of these to see if there's any change. So that's the first step here with strategic improvements. The second step is we're asking everybody to pick 3 categories, so 3 of these categories that you want to focus on this grant year. So, for example, you may say you want to focus on mentor recruitment and mentee recruitment, and you can fill in some information about how you actually want to improve upon that. So, what are you planning on doing? Are you planning on, going out and talking to local businesses more? How many new mentors are you actually looking to do? But what are you looking to do to improve your mentor recruitment? So you want to fill in 3 of those, and I will walk through with you when we meet, just sort of asking more questions to make sure you fully understand it, but see if there's any other ways in which you can improve upon one of those. Maybe if you wanted to improve your training, you're going to start offering more mentor trainings outside of the initial mentor training, or tweak how you're doing it so that you're doing it in a way that it's a pizza party or a potluck so you get better attendance. Things along those lines. Last question in this section is describing the system for ensuring that the program will continue to meet all required best practices. So how are you actually making sure that you're meeting best practices beyond just saying, yeah, I'm doing it? So are you reviewing it, all best practices over the course of the year with your team? Are you doing it with your advisory council? Once again, I can help talk to you about this. Mobius has helped sort of devise a system to do this where it breaks out best practices into one-pagers so you can actually review with your board if it makes sense and that's how you want to do it. But just wanted to make sure that there's a system in place for how you intend to make sure you continue to meet best practices. So that's the strategic improvement. If you go down to program measures, this is getting into the RBA side of things with what Kate had talked about. So you have how much, how well, and is anybody better off? So these are all required questions here. So how many net new matches do you plan on making? Once again, this could be 0. You don't have to actually add matches to receive a grant. If you're going to be reducing matches, we'd love to talk about it and figure out why, but there are some times that, maybe funding's cut and you need to cut staff, or you've been supporting more matches than you should be and realize it's not sustainable. But net new matches, again, if you're starting off the grant year with 30 matches and you say you're going to add 5 net new matches, you're going to end the grant year with 35 matches. So you may have to recruit 15 mentors to do that, but net new matches is actually new matches that are created in total. So here you're going to include how many matches total in your program at the end of the grant year will be community-based and how many will be school-based. Some of you do one or the other, some of you do both. So for the sake of just pretending we're a program that does both, we're going to put that we have 10 community-based matches and 10 school-based matches. You need to fill in this information here so that later on in the application it will populate some other information for you. If you don't do, you can put in 0 here, or you can leave it blank. It's okay. For all these program measures, there's the opportunity to include additional program measures. You don't have to. I encourage you to think about how, and sort of what Kate was talking about, how can you utilize what we're doing here to improve your program? So are there other things that you can do to make your program run better? So a few other possible program measures you could put in here that would fit underneath how well. And once again, we'll be working with you on this. We'll talk through it. Because it can be tricky if you're new to RBA to figure out, what would be under how well, what would be under how much. So underneath how much, other possible opportunities, and we have a little summary up here. They could be an additional number. Say you're going to add, you're going to have 5 group activities offered during the grant year. You want to have everything with how much is how much is the number that you're going to have. So number of ongoing trainings, number of mentors pitches done at businesses, number of new mentors recruited, all these different data that I think you want to think about what's going to highlight that your program is doing well and what can you actually track. So that's how much. Once again, if you have questions, feel free to shout them out. We can come back to things. And by shout them out, I mean type it in the chat window because you're all muted. But how well? The purpose of this section is to really understand the quality of the program and outline performance measures. So how well, we're thinking about percentage. So these questions are the required ones. The percentage of mentees that express that they agree or strongly agree that they would recommend having a mentor to their friends. Percentage of mentors that would express that they'd recommend being a mentor to their friends, families, or colleagues. I think that'd be a good measure that if your program's running well, the people in your program think other people should be doing it. These questions will actually be core questions, so everybody that receives funding will be having to ask these questions, and we'll provide the language for it. So it's really tying into the core questions that we ask you to ask now become grant measures so that you can do this. This doesn't mean that this is going to be 100%. Each one of these different percentages and measures, it's for your program to determine what is appropriate. It's a goal for your program to have, and then we can reflect back on it. In the first year here, it's going to take a little bit of us figuring out together what's realistic. So we can talk more about it when we meet one-on-one, what you feel is appropriate. Number of matches retained during the grant year. Percent of matches retained during the grant year, which is September through May. That gives ideally you want to retain as many matches as possible, but that's unrealistic to have 100% there as well. We realize that matches end in a ways that are out of your control. A family moves, a mentor moves, life situations change, and that's totally understandable. But we're looking for programs to determine what they feel their match retention for the year should be. And when you report out, we'll provide you the opportunity to really explain why matches ended if they did end. And then the last one here that's required is % of match requests filled during the grant year. We realize that some of you have way more people interested in becoming mentees than you ever can fill. But I think this is a great opportunity for us, Mobius and programs, to really see how many folks are actually, I'll answer the question in a second, how many folks are, so if you're only matching 50% of the folks that request, great, let's have a conversation of, do you want to increase? Do you want to actually match more folks? Do we need to help find you more funding so you have more staff time? Or does it, is that all you can actually handle at this time? So we have a message from Katie. So those percentages are based on the past September to May. So yes, I think that in this year you're going to have to sort of guess where it would be if you can't gather. If you don't have that information, if you haven't been collecting that information, then it will be sort of guessing where you will be and what you want to be at. If you do have that information, I would base it off of the past year. The last part there is just explaining how you're actually going to track match requests filled, because we realize this is something that we haven't asked before, so we want to make sure folks have a system for tracking that. If it's just using the Vermont Mentoring database to your database, that's fine. Once again, you have optional measures, which we'll get into more when we meet, but an optional measure could be a similar question that you might ask parents if you're doing parent surveys. So, what percentage of parents would express that they think that their friends should have mentors for their kids? Maybe it could be how quickly folks are actually paired. A percentage of youth that are matched within 6 months of required to have a mentor. It could be a question along the lines, or a measure along the lines of mentors feeling that they have the training and support they need. It really is up to you, but you need to figure out if you're asking it, you have a way of measuring it. And so you can ask it during the surveys. And all this stuff should actually be down here in this section. So getting into, is anybody better off? This is number and percentage. So you're thinking about, this is really at the core of what your program should be delivering. You want your mentees and mentors to be better off. So what are you trying to gather? So one of the aspects that we ask with the core surveys that we're asking folks to report on is number and percentage of mentees that agree or strongly agree that they matter to adults in their community, mentors expressing that they've made a difference in their mentees' lives, and mentors expressing that they've noticed positive change since they started meeting. Once again, we're only asking, you may want to have an additional measure saying this same question here, but for parents. That's great. We'd love you to, but we're not requiring you to run parent surveys. So we're only using questions that are actually going to get from the core surveys. So Wendy's asking if these questions are on the actual grant. So this is the actual grant. This is what you're filling out. This is the grant application. So instead of having in the past where we say, what are your grant goals, and left it very open, we're trying to guide folks a little bit more, saying, here, these are your grant goals because you're already gathering this information. This is what you're looking at. Instead of creating grant goals from scratch, let's guide you to these are the grant goals that you have. Additional measures for this could be number and youth of mentees that report that their mentor has introduced them to someone new or a new concept or a new activity. It really, in general, I would say, think about is anybody better off? You want to be thinking about what's the core of your program, what's your mission, what's your vision, what's your goals of your program, and then how are you measuring those things, and those can become this. Those can become is anybody better off, and I can help you out with that. As Kate mentioned, Mobius is going through RBA as well. I'm learning. I've been working on it for a while now, but I'm not an expert, but we always have folks in the field that we can go back to if we have some clarifying questions. The last part in strategic program measures is how to do strategic improvements you chose positively influence your program performance. So going back up to the strategic improvements, which is underneath the QMS, how are those things that you said you're going to work on, how do those positively influence what you just put in underneath your performance measures? So for example, if you said you're going to work on monitoring and support, that's great. So maybe monitoring and support was the section of the strategic improvements that you're going to work on. So how that impact what you put in this area for program performance? So if you said that you're going to, you want to see more of your matches continue beyond 1 year minimum requirement, and you're working on that through the monitoring and support section, you're going to have a mentor celebration at the beginning and end of year. You're going to include highlight mentors in newsletters. You're going to put on new match activities, hoping that all that's going to result in better retention beyond 1 year. That would be a way in which you could put it in this section. You want to have 3 of these. You want to have 1 for each of the strategic improvements. How is it impacting your program performance? So if you're going to, focus on recruitment, maybe another one could be, we're going to focus on recruitment. So we're going to recruit. One of the program measures could have been that you're having. I realize it's probably hard to read these on my screen, but I'm just putting it in so people can glance at it. For recruitment, maybe you're saying one of your program measures is number of new mentors recruited. And therefore, you're talking about, in your strategic improvements, you're talking about how, for recruitment, you're going to have more recruitment events at businesses. You're going to, give an award to a mentor at the end of the year that does the most recruitment. You're going to revise your recruitment materials and get your advisory board more involved. All these things hopefully are tying into ways in which you can improve your program and improve your program in a way that doesn't add more staff time to you. I think the quality mentoring system in general takes some time to go through and look at, but the goal of it is that it streamlines your program, makes you more efficient and more successful in what you do. And Mobius is there to help you. So I wanted to just pause for a second and make sure Kate didn't have anything else she wanted to add in this area. Kate, I'm just going to unmute you just so, and if anybody has any questions here before I keep on going. I realize this is a lot to get through. And once again, this is why we actually will sit down when we meet and walk through this together, and you'll have time to play with it before we meet. So Kate, anything that you feel like to highlight or correct anything I said to make it more clear?
I think you are a star pupil, Jed. I'm looking at some of the questions in the chat, and I love the fact that folks are noticing. They love the simplicity, and this is nice. And I have to say, I have to agree. And hopefully, many of you are feeling the same way. And also the connection to the work that's already being done, right? So the connection to the surveys that are required, right? Why we're in parallel programs, let's make them fit together nicely. So I think that's a good plus of the change. And just to reiterate, RBA works if you're honest and you sincerely want to improve, right? So that top part where you're grading yourself, it's only going to work if you're really honest and transparent. And part of that accountability to funders and to learning communities and our promise to our communities is let's be self-aware and honest. And if you find that you are coming across a funder who doesn't say, the most important thing is that you're learning and improving, not that you're perfect now, because who is perfect now? It all works in concert. So the other part about this data, if you haven't been doing this, this is a point in time based on this application. RBA also works best if you're tracking the data consistently and looking at your trend lines, and that you're looking at it on a regular basis. So for purposes of this grant, you're going to look back and do a little digging into your existing data or do a gut check and put in where you are and the things that you're planning. It may change last year's data, but really what you want to be looking at this is through the course of the year, what's our data telling us? Are the actions we're taking doing the change that we expect it to or not? What else could we do to make it better? Because if you wait until the end of the year, it's too late for this year's improvement. So I would recommend that you sort of figure out what you want to measure, start pulling that data together and start looking at it on a regular basis, at a minimum year to year, but ideally on a more regular basis.
And as with past grants, I mean, we realize that you're all running amazing programs already, and we're not saying that you have to change what you're doing. We're just asking you to take a look and figure out, are there ways in which you can improve, or what are the things you're doing that are amazing that you really want to highlight? Because you are competing for funding with one another. We try to make sure that we're getting funding to everybody that deserves funding, and we're trying to raise more money that we can grant out. But as with any grant, you want to paint the strongest picture of your program. So That's the program measures section. Going down, the next section would be general program information. So up top where we had said underneath how much, we said we ran a community-based and a school-based program. That triggered this section to have this information in it. If you had not put any numbers in there, this section would actually be blank. So we asked you to sort of start at the top and work your way down. Because we said we ran a community-based program, the first question is, does your program run year-round or not? Because we want to make sure we're getting the number of weeks that your program runs. In the grant guidelines, one of the qualifiers for in terms of where you fall in that funding range is how many weeks of programming do you run. If you ran a program that was exactly the same as another, and you ran it for 25 weeks, another person ran it for 40, the program running 40 weeks should technically get more funding per match because it costs more to run the program for a longer amount of time. So does your program run year-round? If it's yes, that's great. But yes, if it's no, that's fine too. It triggers the next level of questions, which is when does your program, what's your start date? So maybe your start date is September 1. What's your end date? Put in your end date. We'll say May 31st, great. And then how many weeks during that time do you not run programming? So thinking about holidays, school vacations, this allows you to sort of look through the school your program calendar. Maybe you're not running programming 5 weeks during the year. Same thing with school-based. How many days, when you start, when you end, you can plug it in there as well. That will calculate and give us an actual number, which you can see when we get later into viewing your application. The next step is financials. So this is really simplified from the past. In the past, you had to fill out how much money you raised in the past year, fill out your grant application budget here. We really are just asking you how much are you requesting. So say you're requesting $10,000. Great. Does this fall within the specified range in the grant guidelines? So if we go back to the grant guidelines, which I think I can do here, well, we won't do it because it's going to skip around on the screen too much. That's the range for school-based at a certain level, for community-based at a certain level. If you read the grant lines, hopefully you saw that. Does that funding per match fall within that range? So if you divide $10,000 by the number of matches, does it fall within that range? If it's yes, great. If it's no, okay. You got to explain either way why. And so, you know what, we're going to go back in and look at it just so I can make sure everybody's on the same page going into the grant guidelines. So bear with me for a second here. So if we jump right down to rewarding, so here is what we're talking about. So community-based, we're looking at $170 to $400 per match based on these aspects. So based on your location in the state, based on your program size, if you're a small nonprofit, you're probably going to get more money per match than if you're a huge nonprofit because, with scale there comes a little bit of cost savings. So all these different aspects, that's what we're talking about when we get into what are the qualifiers. So you want to basically put in the amount of money you're requesting and then lay out why you think you deserve that much. We'll look at the grant budget in a minute. When we go into the document library, there's a budget format we ask everybody to use, a template, which you'll upload here. And then the other questions is how will you use the Vermont Mentoring Grant to leverage other funding? So we realize that this isn't going to cover 100% of your funding. And so we're hopeful that by having a funder through Mobius as a funder, you can use that money to leverage personal donations. You can use it as a matching grant. You can use it to, say that you're going to show the support of Mobius and your other funding requests, looking to see what you're doing. And then finally in this section, looking at the budget document you filled out, what funding has been secured. So we want to know where you're at. So we're looking at it, depending on when your fiscal year is, what funding do you have in the bank already? The other section provides an opportunity for you to share a short story. You want it to link to your performance measures. So you want to share a story. If you're talking about how matches are lasting beyond one calendar year, maybe the story you tell is about a kid who's been with their match for 7 years, and you link it to the performance measure and how you kept that measure involved, and painting the story about how this match lasting longer has benefited this child and their family. You just really want to make sure the fact this is an opportunity for you to share. We got a lot of data. Share a story. We asked everybody who's going to share at least one story, but the power of that story can really be bolstered by linking it to the data that you have. These two questions down here are optional. Feel free to share anything else you want to. And then before we get to attachments, we just want to know if you're interested in receiving a scholarship to go to the National Mentoring Summit in DC at the end of January, or if there's a Northeast Regional Conference in the fall, if you'd like to receive a scholarship to do so. Don't build that into your budget. That's bonus money. We try to reserve some money for programs to do that, so we have some representation down there and people get the opportunity to do so. But just want to ask for folks to do that. In the attachments, it's listed out pretty clearly what you need in the grant guidelines. It lists out what you need to do, but you need a list of your board or your advisory council. You need your current insurance documents. If they're expiring in September, that's fine. Give me what you have. Once you have new stuff, email it to me. And then any other documents you want to attach. If you have something else, the letters of support, if you have pictures you want to send, whatever you think would make your grant stronger, I'm open to looking at and passing on to the grant committee. So I'm going to hop into just how to save and come back to this, and also into the document library. So this will time out. If you go out for a really long lunch while you're filling this out, this will time out on you and you'll be frustrated. So, if you're working on it for an hour, you might want to save it here and there. If you save the application, that's great. You save it, and I'm going to show you how to get back there. So originally you had gone to new grant application. When you log into the database, if you are working on it, on a Monday and you want to come back to it on Tuesday, this is what you'll see when you log in. You click on agencies, you click on your agency, and then you click on grants. And you'll see if your agency has ever filled out. So you want to find the one that's appropriate. You see this one has some past grants from past years. You can click on view and you can view it. And this sort of gives you a summary of what you filled out. You can expand things out. Mine is not fully because we didn't fill out everything. You can edit it, and this brings you right back in. Once again, you want to wait for it to load fully. And this brings you back and everything. Everything's minimized again, but you can get right back into it and keep on filling it out. For the attachment for the grant budget, if you go to document library, we're going to save this again because we're going to come back to it. If you go to document library, there's a bunch of documents in here. You want to sort things to make your life easy. Go to 2017, 2018 Vermont Mentoring Grants. There's 4 documents. So the grant guidelines are here, but then there's also the general grant budget template. So you click on view, click on download, and we're asking everybody to use it. It makes life a lot easier for myself, but also for the grant committee. You want the grant committee not struggling to understand your grant, and if they're looking at 35 grants, you want them to be making sure that they understand what you put in there. So we're asking everybody to do the same. That's not the document. Hold on a second here. There we go. So this may be hard to see. You'll download it. Just to make it a little bit bigger on my screen here. Up top, the first thing you want to do is you want to change this name so that when I get it and I print it out, I know it's your program. So, it's Mentoring Inc. is the name of this organization. Sure. What's your fiscal year? So put in your fiscal year. If it's 7/1 to 7/1/17 to 6/30/18. Great. So I have that information right there. You can just delete that, that's fine. We just want to make sure that you understand that you're only putting in for your programs that you're applying for funding, not your full agency, unless full agency is just a mentoring program. You're putting in the request, so for the fiscal year that you're requesting funding for, what are you going to get from these different sources? If you're getting in kind, put it right here. What's the previous fiscal year's total revenue? So we want to be able to compare to what you had last year. So if you're all of a sudden saying that you're bringing in $100,000 more, great. We want to see where that's coming from. So this is last fiscal year. This is the current fiscal year you're applying for. All these things will populate. So if you put $100 in here, it's just going to add it up for you. Great. This used to be $200. You don't have to do the math. It does it for you. Going down into the expenses, once again, these columns right here are the fiscal year you're applying for. This is last fiscal year. Hopefully, these are things that you should feel pretty familiar with. This is where you want to put down what your request is. So if you're asking for $10,000 in your Vermont Mentoring Grant, this line should add up to $10,000. This is anything else. So if you're asking for, say that $10,000 is all going to your program coordinator. Great, but the program coordinator is actually getting paid $20,000 throughout the year. That's where the other $10,000 comes from. I don't need to know, we're going to see where that money is coming from up in the revenue, but we just need to broken out where the money comes from for the Vermont Mentoring Grant. Once again, total program costs from last year. Maybe that person got paid 20 grand last year as well. All that will add up down here. And then this year we added a new column because it's something I'm always calculating and sharing with the grant committee. We want to know what percentage of your budget overall is the Vermont Mentoring Grant request. So for this program, it'd be 50% with the sample numbers I plugged in. All that's going to populate. I ask that you save this as wherever you're going to save it, you save it as a Excel spreadsheet, and you actually attach it as an Excel spreadsheet so that I can look at that. I got way too many. There we go. Once again, that gets added into your grant. So all this is outlined in the grant guidelines. To get to the grant again, if you want to edit it one more time, you go into agency, you go into your agency, click on grants, and then you click edit here, and you can get right back into it. If you want to view your grant after you submit it, you can view it. If you want to print out a paper copy, you can print PDF, and it will actually allow you to print either to your printer, your local printer, or you can print to a PDF if you want to here, and it will just have it set up. I will talk to CivicCorps apparently because it's showing that it's minimized, but we can probably just maximize it here and make it work. That will be fixed before you all have to do it. We're still working out some kinks apparently. So that's pretty much it. I mean, this is the grant. I realize it's a lot to absorb. You're going to have time to play with it. You're going to have time with me one-on-one to talk about it. I'm going to unmute everybody and see how it works, to see if there's any questions. All right. Anybody have any questions?
This is Catherine. I don't have any questions, but I want to say this was very helpful.
Great, thank you. All righty. If no one has other questions, we're gonna be right on the 1 hour mark here. I'm gonna keep true to my word. You always can go back and view this if you really liked it or you need a refresher, but you also can call and ask. I just ask that everybody does review the grant guidelines, and if you haven't heard from me about setting up a grant meeting, I will be in touch soon, or feel free to reach out to me. But I really appreciate you all taking time out of your day to look at this and being open to some new changes that we're putting through here. And as we mentioned before, hopefully you all find it beneficial, because really everything we're doing here at Mobius is really working with you to make your programs better and make your life easier. So we exist to support you, so that's what we're looking to do. Thank you everybody for making the time, and have a great week. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.